Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Kevin Kelton, a Democrat who has a new appreciation for the miracle that is electricity. And this week, I am here along with
Greg Matuzak. I am now taking a cue from Ted Cruz. In fact, I'm blaming my children for that pause you just heard. That was their fault. It wasn't my fault. I'm not sorry. Damn you, children. There you go.
and Ward Anderson.
I do not have the wit or intelligence of a Kevin Kelton, nor do I have the political experience of a Greg Matuzak. So what do I bring, listeners? Sheer sexual magnetism.
Absolutely.
Joining us this week on the More Perfect Union podcast, he is a star of stage and screen, one of the busiest comedians working across North America today, standing at nearly 7 feet tall, Larry XL.
Oh, you forgot to mention my big blue ox. Yeah, thanks. There are no busy comedians right now at all. Not even Dave Chappelle's busy right now. He's basically just, the biggest comedians on earth are just sitting around cooling their heels, binge watching Netflix and Hulu shows.
How tall are you, actually, Larry? Because I always look up to you, like literally. How tall are you now?
6'6". Although I haven't measured recently. I might have shrunken just because, will to live kind of takes your loss of will to live kind of inches off your height.
Larry, when is the last time you were in front of a live audience?
December.
Wow. Oh, December of last year.
No, December 2020. I did a bar gig in Southern Maryland. Normally I would be doing shows every weekend. Now I'm lucky if I get to do one show every 3 or 4 months. So yeah.
And are the audiences wearing masks?
Yes.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here. Thanks for joining us. This week, we want to start with the topic that is near and dear to my heart, the big freeze that hit Texas and other southwestern states and probably about 35 to 50% of the country. You guys weren't affected that badly, were you?
Well, it affected that we couldn't do a podcast last time.
That's true. That was my fault, everybody.
I mean, it was cold here and whatnot. I sent my kids to shovel the snow a lot. But for the most part, we were more worried about you, Kevin.
Yeah, when Jess and I were looking for places to move to, we ruled out places like Denver and Colorado Springs because we said we don't want to deal with winters anymore. And, of course, our first winter here was the worst winter in about 100 years. It got down into the single digits, which I know for a lot of the country, hey, that happens every year. That's not that big a deal. But here it was a big deal. The power grid was not up to it. Texas has some issues that they're going to hopefully start to at least deal with, if not resolve. And I got to tell you, last Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday were 3 of the worst days of my life. We had power less than half the time. I'd say about 20% of the time. And the rest of the time, the power was off, the heat was off, and the house was getting awful cold.
Yeah, I mean, if only they'd have spent that wall money on infrastructure, you guys would have kind of be able to coast through it.
It's very possible that, I haven't dug deeply into the politics of it, but apparently Texas, first of all, they're energy independent. They would not form any alliances with other states, so we could not draw from other states in a crisis. And then they did not make the necessary infrastructure investments that would have been necessary to prevent this. In fact, they did some things that were counter to preventing power outages during a winter freeze, and we paid for it dearly. I'm a little sad going into this coming week, knowing that the stories that are going to come out now about homes destroyed and lives lost are going to be really, really devastating.
Well, Rick Perry yesterday said, and I don't want to paraphrase too much, and I don't have the exact quote, but he pretty much said that he was sure that Texas and Texans would have spent a couple more days without power if it meant the federal government would stay out of Texas's power grid and Texas's business.
Did he?
Yeah. So, but you're down there. How do you, and I know that there's this whole, Texas yeehaw, secession, we're Texas, border free, whatever attitude. Do you think before and after, I don't know if you've talked to many of your neighbors.
Well,
has there been a change?
I doubt there's been much of a change. There's a dichotomy. People were upset. People were struggling. It was a horrible week. And yet those people that feel the way Perry does, I doubt it changed their politics at all. In fact, there were people here that were blaming the Biden administration. I saw one person post a meme that said that it was Biden who allowed the Chinese into our electricity grid. So these people are, they're so gone that nothing is going to change their minds.
But, it is amazing how quickly Biden had already given federal funds.
Oh, yeah, he'll get no credit for that. And nor will the federal government. They'll still hate the government.
That's a shame. And especially since we've heard this morning a representative from Texas was already saying that some of the outrageous heating costs, because it is private firms, some of that money is going to be used to pay for those outrageous heating costs. That those $15,000 heating bills, people are going to say that's what that federal money, disaster money, is going to go for.
Well, we'll see. I have a feeling that it's not going to go for that, and I have a feeling there's going to be some real controversies because individuals are going to get hit with massive bills. I haven't even tried to look at mine yet. I'm afraid to. And what do you do when the utility says pay it or we're going to turn off your power? And, unless you want to go out and get a lawyer and litigate it for 6 months or a year, what are you going to do? There is no regulatory commission here. Texas is not going to take the side of the individual homeowner. It's not.
No, and the actual quote from Rick Perry was Texas. It starts with, those watching on the left may see the situation in Texas as an opportunity to expand their top-down radical proposals. Texas would be without electricity for longer than 3 days to keep the federal government out of their business. Try not to let whatever the crisis of the day is take your eye off having a resilient grid that keeps America safe personally, economically, and strategically.
It was Rahm Emanuel who famously said, let no crisis go. Now I'm going to blank on the actual quote, but he said, never waste a crisis, basically. And now that the GOP has sort of adapted that to never let a crisis, never waste a crisis as a way to take a shot at liberal politics. Because Governor Abbott was on TV during this thing blaming wind power. Now, I don't know whether you guys followed it in that granular way, but wind power is somewhere between 7 and 10% of the total electricity dynamic of this state. And the turbines, some of them froze, but only a fraction of the turbines froze. So you're talking about anywhere from 2, 3, 5% of the total electricity in the state might have been affected because wind power failed. The traditional forms of energy, natural gas, the electric grid, nuclear, they failed on a massive, massive scale. And yet they're trying to pin this on renewable energy, which is just insane.
Here's a big problem that reason stuff like this continues to happen and will always happen. 30, 40 years ago, if you were a public figure and you got on the news and you lied about something, they would call you on it immediately and they would never put a microphone in front of you ever again. Well, we stopped doing that. And now here we are. We're letting people just run with lies and we're not checking them on it at all, and there's no consequence to it anymore. So until we fix that problem, we are always going to have this bitter, fuck you, I'm right mentality going through everything. And
yeah.
And because of that, because of what Larry's saying, is what we've seen now is Republicans will not ever accept blame for anything, ever. No blame, no responsibility. They'll never do that. And they'll even find ways to fabricate how it was liberals' fault. Now, the wind turbines that froze in Texas, in some ways, you have to defend Texas. And what I mean by that is that the wind turbines froze, but they didn't have to, because there is de-icing technology that can be used on the wind turbines. However, Texas doesn't get that cold, so they don't have that technology with their wind turbines. There have been wind turbines in Antarctica for 11 years, right? So they can operate in extreme cold. But at the same time, being originally from Georgia, it's one thing for a state to not be prepared. And we could talk about that and the government responsibility, and we could talk about whether or not they should have had de-icing on the wind turbines or whatever. But I've seen a lot of people unfairly kind of criticize Texans for not being able to handle this. And I used to always say this long after I moved out of the South and I moved north, especially here to Canada, where I am now, when people would go, "Oh my God, you people down south, it barely snows and you lose it. You don't know how to drive. It's crazy." And I would go, well, yeah, because it's not something that ever happens there. You know, it's something like in Georgia, we used to get 2 days of snow per year, and that was a couple of inches, right? So I'm not surprised at how much of Texas couldn't deal with this. You're talking about something that the average Texan has never dealt with in their lives.
Anyway, so it happened. It's over at this point. Hopefully the collateral damage will not be too bad, but it's going to be a story going on for a long, long time. Moving on from natural disasters, we want to talk about something positive in the news, which is that it's February and it's Black History Month. We didn't acknowledge it at the beginning of the month, but we wanted to bring it up today. And I wanted to ask you guys what that means to you and if you do anything different during Black History Month.
Well, I do try, to watch more entertainment from Black artists during Black History Month. All the streaming sites seem to have little sections in the queue that say, "Hey, it's Black History Month. Check out this entertainment you might not be aware of." And, I try to find those films or TV shows that maybe I've missed, that I haven't seen, that get pointed out to me by my queue. So I do definitely try to do that.
I always try to read 2 biographies of famous Black musicians. I'm always that's kind of my bag, is to read. I'm into biographies. So I reread Miles Davis's. It's by far my favorite. And then I read another one on John Coltrane. So it's like my 10th John Coltrane biography. So that was this year. And, try to explore new artists, maybe that I haven't heard before.
I'm going to be the fly in the ointment here. I'm glad you guys are interested in Black culture, but Black history is far more than about people you find entertaining. There's been a lot of discussions about, Black Lives Matter, and people have asked me, to explain the effects of systematic racism. And I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, look, if you really cared, you would just get online and do the research yourself and stop asking me to do it, because I'm a comic. I am not an historical scholar, and it is not my job to educate you about the horrors of being a minority in America from, the 70s to now. It's great that you want to know about Miles Davis and stuff like that, but it'd be more interesting if you would take an interest in things like, I don't know, the Tuskegee experiments, or or the Tulsa riots, or like one of the millions and millions and millions of ways that this country had its foot on the neck of minorities and continues to have its foot on the neck of minorities, and why nobody really is interested in taking their foot off of our necks.
Larry, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask everybody. Obviously, the Black community has been the most grievously oppressed community, a minority community in this country and maybe in the world. Well, that's a big statement, but certainly in this country since our roots. Do you think it's possible that in this century, another minority might actually surpass that in terms of oppression, or do you think that blacks will continue to be into the 22nd century the most oppressed minority?
I mean, look, like you know the answer to that question.
I suspect I do.
Yeah, you already know the answer to that question. So, why is it my job to quantify anybody's, oppression with another person's question? Because there's no prize for it.
Yeah.
It's like right now, Asian Americans are getting singled out and targeted, for attacks. And, nobody's really, they're talking about it, but really, is anybody doing anything to stop it? Nobody was really standing up to like the GOP and Trump when they were making really racist anti-Asian statements when the pandemic hit. Same thing goes for like the LGBTQ community, like everybody was talking about, it's not about this, it's about jobs. Well, the first thing, the last administration did was to get in and start kowtowing to the religious right and dismantling every gain that LGBT communities and people of color and other minorities had gained during the Obama administration. So spare me the bullshit about it being about jobs or, economic prowess or our place in the world. It's like, no, you just really want to punch down and not apologize for it. So I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to go on record and say it's like, this oppression is more. No, it's all cut from the same cloth. It's just that America will give you a pass quicker for, aggressions against people of color than they will anybody else.
It's true.
Especially if you're like a cop or an angry white guy or a white woman.
And the other thing about that, one thing that you just said that is true is that we do spend a lot of time talking about issues when it comes to race and oppression and discrimination, but we don't actually spend a lot of time fixing them. We like to think we have. We really like to think we have. But, if you really stop and look at it, we haven't. And you know what? That was a great point that Larry said about the Tulsa riots and about the Tuskegee experiments. I didn't mention that because it's something that I learned years ago. But we found out recently, last year there was a TV show Watchmen on HBO, and it covered the Tulsa riots in an episode. And all over the internet, people talked about how they had never even heard of this. They had never heard of that, or that they didn't know that at one point Tulsa was called the Black Wall Street. And it was a very thriving Black community there that was destroyed.
I will admit that I didn't know about it until the anniversary came up last year. I'm in my 60s, and I was just somehow oblivious. And I'm not proud of it.
And just to some degree, it's like, why am I just finding about this? Well, to some degree, you and a lot of other people really didn't care and really didn't want to dig into the issue. And, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But don't pretend like you care. And like, it's like one of those things where it's like, people, like a lot of like news organizations, a lot of, or it's like, well, what can we do to like, put an end to this or lessen the effect of it? And those communities have been telling you for decades how and why and, what steps you can take. And everybody hears this and they're like, okay. And they shrug and they just go about their business like, okay, what's on Twitter? It's like they don't, there's no follow-up. You just ask the questions. Look, if I would much rather you just not ask the questions or not pretend like you care and instead of like,
But isn't it better, Larry, that I know about it now in my 60s than I never found out about it?
Are you going to do anything with the information?
I'd like to think so. We're talking about it right now.
Yeah, you'd like to think so, but I'm guessing you're probably not going to do anything with that information. Just, and I'm not saying this because I'm judging you as an individual. I'm just saying that, like, I'm just judging from all the other, people that like get these revelations, and then it's like, okay, what are you gonna do with it? I don't know. And then they just mosey on about their lives.
Your perception is reality based on history, right? Historically, we haven't done anything, or we haven't done enough. For
how
those,
many?
there are those out there that will say that we have. Truthfully, maybe the solution to all of this is when it comes to addressing the Black community, maybe what the media should be doing is reporting about economic anxiety, because then they won't shut the fuck up about it.
But then again, it's always
when you talk about race, nobody really wants to talk about it. But you say economic anxiety, they'll send an entire crew to a diner to talk to you for an hour and a half.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just corporations playing us against each other. That's
Well, agreed. But I'm just saying, I'm talking about all the little think pieces after Trump won, when it was all about economic anxiety, and we all know that's not what it actually was, and that was just such a excuse beaten into our brains because the media and the rest of the world, we didn't want to address why Trump really got in office and what people really liked about him. And so it made it easier to blame it on economic anxiety, right? And so that's me being sarcastic, that if we suddenly stop talking about race in the Black community, but if we use the term economic anxiety, then maybe suddenly everyone would care about it. Because, I mean, how long did we hear about economic anxiety? The first year?
Yeah, but that's another thing. Nobody, at the end of the day, we really don't care about the poor and the homeless. It's just a good game to talk. But at the end of the day, we're really not going to do anything to help poor people and homeless people, because, there are other countries that have wrote the blueprint on how to address the problem. And we're just like, no, let's just buy some more bombers, that we don't need.
Okay, well, on that, we want to take a moment to welcome back our sponsor, BetterHelp.com, the online therapy website that helps you identify what's holding you back in life and helps you begin achieving your goals. BetterHelp will match you with your own licensed professional therapist who you can be talking to within as soon as 24 hours.
If you're like me, maybe you don't like to go out to these kinds of appointments and you feel more comfortable at home. So this way you can connect in a safe and private online environment. Very convenient. You can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. That's less than the wait time to fix a broken arm in Canada, I hear.
It's less than the wait time at the local H-E-B supermarket.
And if you're like me and you don't have a lot of money to spend on, things, you'll know that it's more affordable than traditional counseling. And financial aid is available. And there's a broad range of expertise available, which may not be locally available in many areas, like Canada.
And as a More Perfect Union listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/moreperfect. That's one word. That's our code word. So again, join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health by going to BetterHelp, HELP.com/moreperfect. Do it today. And now getting back to our conversation here. In the midst of the COVID crisis, the Biden administration is trying to face one of the most delicate areas of the crisis, which is opening up schools again. And you had some thoughts on that, right?
Well, it wasn't just the Biden. Even the Trump administration was very adamant about opening schools. Even during the height of deaths and everything, they were like, open schools. If schools are open, parents can get back to work. We're seeing huge issues with kids and problems and mental issues, and now I'm mentioning school delays and academic, all sorts of. Everyone wants schools open, but CDC has given out guidelines. We want them 6 feet apart. We want masks. We want staggered classes. Some schools can't give that due to overcrowding in classes, and we've seen overcrowding in classes for years. In Ohio, each community is responsible for levies and taxes and paying for their own new schools. And if they don't want to build a new school, we have overcrowding. That's an old familiar story. Also, like in some states, teachers got the vaccine early so that they could go back and feel safe. but still with a lot of older buildings, like in Chicago, teachers don't feel safe because, especially for their children. So it's kind of a battle. And so now it's kind of an issue with, do we look at a federal level, or is this more of a local question? Should we ask local communities, is it safe for your community? Or is this more of a, do we open it up to the country?
Well, here in Canada, that's been a debate as well, because you have here in Ontario high cases of COVID. But in Toronto, however, most of Ontario is unaffected, right? Ontario is enormous. And in many parts of Ontario, there's been no cases of COVID. In many parts of Canada, there's been no cases or very few cases. And so when it came time to talk about schools reopening, that's one of the debates people had, is they said, well, it's not in this community. So could we at least reopen as if it is here, right? Despite the fact it's not. And funny enough, even though Toronto is hit worse than anywhere else in Ontario, our schools did reopen. My kids are back at school. But it was also a challenge because not every school could open because of the fact that some of them just weren't able to reduce the class sizes or stagger times, as you were talking about. And, my daughter is in grade 2, and there are all kinds of guidelines. They have plexiglass between their desks and tables. Their teacher teaches with a mask and a face shield on. And my daughter is required to have 5 masks per day on her person when she goes to school. Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that here that I know.
Five new masks per day. Like as in she can't just come in with, she's got to come in with clean masks. They can't just keep the same 5. So 5 masks per day with filters, by the way. And that's a thing. Filters.
Yeah, but I can't imagine. I mean, I don't have 5. I have 1 mask with a filter. So
well, they recommend you use paper towels or coffee ground filters for the filter. You insert it into the pocket of the mask, right?
Yeah.
So that's something we're having to do every day. And then on top of that, the kids do not interact outside their immediate classroom, but even in their classroom, they're barely interacting, physically with each other. So there's all kinds of strict guidelines that they're adhering to just to keep schools open, but not all of them are. My neighbor teaches high school and his classes were too big and they couldn't stagger them. So he's doing Zoom teaching still, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My kids are at home doing distance learning. So
I think there's something to be said about not every area is going to have to follow the same rules because not every area is affected the same way.
Yeah, I when in August when they started talking about opening up schools and opening up universities, I thought it was going to be an absolute disaster, and I was just wrong. I thought that the universities would be closed within 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't think that they would be able to do this successfully. And, I'm just making up a number here, but something like 90% of them did it successfully.
Well, I'll say this as someone who had to teach his kids, I had to teach my then first grader because when things shut down, there wasn't the remote learning. There was not Zoom classes. They just sent the schoolwork home and put it online. Kidding. And we had to teach our kids up here last spring. And so I had to essentially assume the role of teacher and checking homework and actually helping to teach my kid, just a first grader,
right,
last spring. And I've always respected teachers. I did study to be a teacher, although I never was one. But man, do I have respect for teachers now. I came out when summer hit and school was out. The thing I said was that no matter what we're paying teachers, as far as I'm concerned, it's not enough. Because I was trying to teach one kid, one 6-year-old. And that was a chore for me. I couldn't imagine a classroom full of them.
Right.
Okay. So we have a couple of topics left and we're really running long. So I want to kind of try to get to everything. Rush Limbaugh the famous broadcaster, is famously dead this week after passing away from lung cancer this past week. And obviously, it's sad when anyone dies, but there were a lot of people, especially on the left, who were critical or mocking Limbaugh's demise. And I wanted to ask you guys, do you feel that there's ever a time when it's fair to mock or deride the departed?
That guy mocked and derided people's deaths and misfortunes. He made a career out of it. It's fair game. He's not a saint. And honestly, in my opinion, he has done more to destroy the idea of America than Osama bin Laden ever did.
That's where I fall. Greg, Ward, any dissenting opinions?
Whenever we hear on the news about some kind of gang violence or drug-related violence, cartel violence, even when Tupac was killed, people said, live by the sword, die by the sword. This is how these people live their lives. I'm not shedding tears. I've never heard, when we hear about gang violence or anything of the sort, people talking about having respect for the dead or don't speak ill of them. Every time we've seen someone killed by a cop in the last 2 years, what is it everyone says? They were thugs. They had it coming. When that Kyle Rittenhouse kid killed people, they couldn't wait to find the criminal records of the people that he killed and go, see, the world's a better place without them. Who cares about these felons that got killed or whatnot? Rush Limbaugh dies and people talk about him the way he talked about others, and suddenly people talk about how it's unfair and we need to be more courteous and be more respectful. Get the fuck out of here with that.
Okay. Okay. I'll be the dissenting voice. I'll be the Larry of the group today.
Greg, you ignorant slut.
So this is how I feel. One, someone once said, they go low, we go high. And I'm not going to take credit for that one. But in all honesty, I do believe that there is a period, a week, 2 weeks of mourning, of respect. And yes, Rush Limbaugh was not the nicest human being, to put it lightly. He had family, he had loved ones who are sad for him. And that's why I don't say anything about people who pass, period. And yes, he was a terrible person, probably. I'm not going to say anything. But I always feel like there is a time limit, whether, I did not wait to jump on Twitter to say, Rush did this, Rush did that. I can wait. And all of his stuff, all his memories, he will not be remembered as a good person. And I'm okay with that. I do not have to be the first one, pissing on his grave, because trust me, people will do that for centuries. And you guys are right. It was him that started this. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
There's a word in there you said, though, Greg, respect. But that's just it. I don't have any respect for him. I had no respect for him before he died. I don't owe him any. It's not a question for respect of him.
It's a respect for myself, and it's a respect for his loved ones. It's for him, no. But out of respect for his loved ones.
He had a loved one. He had a wife. I don't think he had any children.
He had no children. He had He had 3 ex-wives and a 4th wife. Listen, the thing about it is, and they
loved his bank account dearly. So
I didn't joke about his death. I didn't joke about his death, but like on social media, whenever I post rest in peace to someone, I didn't do that with him. I just wrote Rush Limbaugh is dead.
Yeah.
And that's it. But I just want to say real quickly, I don't know how it's begun to happen. And maybe it's just because we want to be nice people. We want to believe the best in ourselves. But this idea that death somehow automatically brings some kind of redemption, or it automatically brings some kind of grace period of respect, or that we need to think of their loved ones or whatever. The day before Rush Limbaugh died, if you had said, that guy's a piece of shit and I hope he burns in hell, no one would have said anything about it. But then the day he dies, you can't say that same thing. Like, you want to talk about snowflakes. You want to talk about being easily offended. Whenever I hear people talk about, everyone's so easily offended these days. You want to talk about really being offended when you can't talk about a person's legacy in death simply because they died. That we have this idea that we have to curb it. It's just silly.
Okay, but you know who cannot be mocked under any circumstances is Democratic senators by a Democrat that now is nominated to be the director of the Office of Budget and Management, because a woman named Neera Tandem was Biden's pick and is Biden's pick to lead the Office of Budget and Management, Office of Management and Budget. But this week, her nomination looks like it may fall apart because a lot of senators, including a couple of Democrats, are saying they can't support her because of comments she made, not only about GOP senators in the past, but about Democratic senators in the past, including making a joke about Bernie Sanders, calling him, as you did earlier to Greg Ward, calling him an ignorant slut in a mock joking manner. But apparently the Sanders people and the senator himself are still fuming about it. So where does that leave us when someone can be canceled from getting a job, say running the Office of Management and Budget, because of tweets that they posed that were simply critical of political opponents?
Honestly, this is why Twitter's a bad idea for politicians. As much as we think it's a great idea so that they can be in touch with the public, then the way, if you're going to be a politician and you're going to be on social media, on Twitter or something like that, then you're going to have to keep it professional. You're just going to have to talk as if you're giving a press release, because this isn't going away. We're not going to stop going after people. When I say we, I don't mean me, but people aren't going to stop going after people for their tweets, especially not if they think they can use it against them. It's just going to happen. We're not going to suddenly, as a society, do a 180 and go, now that we think about it, we overreacted. Let's stop focusing on previous tweets. It's not going to happen. If anything, it's only going to get worse, and people are going to have to start treating their Twitter account like it's a professional work letter that they're sending out or a memo.
Also, I hate the sliding scale of what gets one person canceled doesn't get another person canceled, or cost them anything. Like, you act like she, mocked a disabled person to his face on live TV, and that didn't get Trump, not elected. If anything, it made him more popular. But yet now, you can't joke about another politician who, by the way, politicians should be fair game in any type of like criticism, as long as it's, based in some sort of fact, and has like some truth to it. But, it's like they want to hold like, people on the left to a higher standard, to one standard, but people on the right, they can go into the gutter and nobody really does anything against them.
Yeah. And for the record, Neera Tandem said that vampires have more heart than Ted Cruz, and called Mitch McConnell Voldemort. I mean, it wasn't like she was like using obscenities. It wasn't like she was being, she wasn't mocking the disabled. She was, I think some of the stuff in politician speak was pretty funny. At one point she said, she called Tom Cotton a fraud. Whoop-de-doo. Woo, I know. The other thing is, I've had my talk. I've sat down with my kids and had the talk. And it used to be the talk was about sex, but now it's about Twitter. And about, anything you put out there is there forever and could ruin your life. And that's, your digital footprint. And like in 20 years from now, when you want to direct a Marvel movie, forget it. They're going to dig up the fact that you wrote something when you were 13. And I think I scared them pretty good. But it's important that kids now know they don't have Snapchat. They don't have Twitter. They don't have Facebook. But one's 15 and will probably get one in the next couple of years. But I have really tried to show them every time there's a thing, this is what will happen. You have to really think, and is it worth it?
The second you get a contract with anyone, Disney, DC, any company, the second you sign a contract, go delete your social media accounts. Just delete them. Delete your Twitter. Just delete it.
I love how Greg is like, look, don't be racist or sexist or homophobic. He's just saying, just don't put it on Twitter.
He's a realist.
Have all the fucked up worldviews you want to. Just don't write it down anywhere.
No. Just go hog wild, shit crazy. Keep it amongst your friends in your own Snapchat circle.
Greg, just tell your kids to be Republicans.
Donald Trump is making his big comeback next week. He has been booked to speak at CPAC, the big conservative conference, I believe next Sunday. And this is his coming out party, as it were. Greg, what are you looking forward to? And do you think that this is going to be the start of a second Trump run?
This all reminds me of like in Goodfellas, where Paulie is still running the mob from inside the jail. And this is exactly it. Where Trump is no longer in office, but he's still telling people like, oh, okay, and he's slicing the garlic with a razor blade, and he wants his Diet Coke handed to him in a certain way. But this is it, and he's getting ready to come back out and do his shit everywhere. And his people have already said, look, he's already interested. Ivanka has already said that she's not running against Rubio, so he's safe, but he's still going to be a sympathetic self as always. He is going to pretty much say, like, I want A, B, and C, and Q. Haha, see what I did there? For the rest of the next 4 years, and maybe he'll run. He may even start raising money just to be an asshole.
I think their big fear is that he might run third party. I think that's what they don't want. They're not afraid of him running because they think he might be. Listen, I don't see anyone on the horizon in the Republican Party who could win a primary campaign against Donald Trump. Ted Cruz can't do it. Josh Hawley can't do it. Yeah, Nikki Haley. None of these people could take Trump on and beat him in a primary. So the question is, does he want to run, and is he physically up to it? But what he could do is threaten to run third party, and they will wet their pants.
I'm just like, I find it interesting that, this guy pretty much ran the country into the ground and then tried to incite an insurrection, and people are giving him another opportunity to speak in public and incite another riot.
They liked it. They don't care. The conservatives thought that was the start of a revolution.
He owned the libs. They love it.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? The Republicans literally have no governing to run on. They have not accomplished anything in years that they can actually run on when it comes to, especially, they don't even talk about the tax
cuts anymore. There's nothing.
No.
They got nothing.
They've got nothing to run on. It was like every time I hear people start bringing up Trump running again and everything, I just go, name a policy. Like, nobody can name anything. But Trump is this personality that people love because they love that he's a dick. And that's what it all comes back to. And so, yes, of course he'll run again. Of course they'll let him speak. He's the only thing, as much as people talk about Donald Trump has destroyed the Republican Party, he's the only thing they've got going for them right now. If Donald Trump died tomorrow, the Republican Party has nothing. They have no one.
Do you remember how the economy was in such a shithole for that George W. Bush wasn't even invited to, or maybe he wasn't, but he didn't show up to the GOP convention for years. I don't know. I mean, he just wasn't there. H might have been there, but W and he didn't speak, and neither did Cheney. And I mean, to have a former president, the former president, not even speak because he had screwed up his job so bad and left us in such a recession was just so ridiculous. And then having Trump do the exact same thing, and they're like, oh, I really like this guy. I mean, he really, wipes his ass with the curtains when he leaves. I like that about this one.
Well, we want to thank everybody for listening. If you enjoy what we do here, please follow us on Twitter at MPU Podcast and on Instagram at MPU Fan Club. And don't forget to share our link on your Facebook timeline and other social media accounts so your friends can discover us as well. Larry, we want to thank you for being here tonight. You brought in a fresh perspective that we sorely lack here, and I really enjoyed having you on.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Larry, now's your time to plug anything, websites, merch, night shirts, candlestick holders. What do you got for us?
Go to larryxl.com. That's got my scant few comedy dates that I have coming up on it. You can follow me on Larry XL on Twitter, comedian Larry XL on Instagram, and then also have a musical project called Scorn Star. It has a couple albums out on iTunes and CD Baby.
And we want to thank our sponsor, BetterHelp.com. And that being said, Greg, what's on tap for you this coming week?
I am still trying to get waiting for my free tickets to CPAC. I keep calling, and for some reason, all the nude pictures I've sent to them has not given me anything.
Don't give up yet.
No, I'm just going to keep sending them more nude pictures. I keep sending them my Buffalo Bill pictures, and